The house was the kind you'd see in architectural magazines: glass walls, sleek lines, soft lighting that adjusted to mood and time of day, and an AI system that responded to voice commands. With eerie precision, everything inside was designed for luxury and efficiency: smart temperature control, motorized blinds, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that moved with a button, and a kitchen that practically cooked for you. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. And Mira was its queen. 20-9 years old, 7 months pregnant, and often described by friends as quietly brilliant. Mira had always preferred substance over noise. Her soft-spoken nature was balanced by an observant mind and a warm heart. Before her pregnancy, she had worked as a child psychologist, a job that suited her patient, empathetic demeanor. She had put her career on hold to prepare for motherhood, a decision she'd made with hope in her heart and trust in her future. That future, she believed, had begun when she married Samir. Samir was everything that made people stop and stare. A self-made tech millionaire by 32, strikingly handsome, always dressed in expensive simplicity-tailored suits, designer watches, and shoes that never made a sound. Mira had met him at a conference where she was speaking on childhood trauma. He'd listened intently, asked insightful questions, and charmed her with his gentle tone and understated humor. Their courtship had been swift, magnetic. When he proposed in front of a starlit lake with a sapphire ring and quiet promise, she said yes without hesitation. At first, their life together had been the stuff of dreams: surprise weekend getaways, candlelit dinners, a private library he built just for her. And when they found out she was pregnant, Samir had cried tears of joy. He'd claimed before cradling her in his arms and whispering how their child would complete them. But lately, something had shifted. Samir still said all the right things. He still kissed her goodbye before leaving for the office, still placed his hand gently on her belly in passing, still brought home decaf lattes and her favorite almond croissants. Yet, Mira had begun to sense a subtle distance, a detachment in his gaze, a mechanical quality to his affection. His compliments felt like lines rehearsed too many times. His touch, while gentle, felt absent of emotion. He listened, but didn't hear. There were moments she would wake in the night, hand on her belly, and glance at the spot beside her only to find it cold, empty. Business trips had increased. His office door was often locked. When she asked how he was, he smiled too easily. Tired, he would say, "Don't worry." But she did worry, because a perfect home, Mira knew, could still hide imperfect truths. And while the house they lived in was smart enough to recognize her voice and adjust the lighting to soothe her, Samir, somehow, no longer did. In public, Samir was a portrait of devotion. He held Mira's hand gently as they walked into charity galas, opened car doors for her, kissed her temple during social gatherings. People often complimented them. "You two are perfect. Samir's such a gentleman. Mira, you're glowing with happiness." Mira would smile politely and nod. She had perfected the performance. After all, what else could she do? Behind closed doors, Samir was someone else entirely. Not violent, not overtly cruel, but distant, sharp, and quietly dismissive. His warmth had grown conditional, available when convenient, absent when she needed it most. The change had crept in slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, like a cold draft beneath a tightly shut window. At dinner, she would try to start conversations, ask about his day, talk about the baby, share something she'd read, but he always seemed distracted. "You worry too much," he would say, barely lifting his eyes from his phone. Or worse, "You're being overly emotional again." "It's probably the hormones." Whenever she expressed concern about his growing absences, the way he avoided eye contact, the subtle coldness in his voice, he would chuckle softly and tilt his head like she was amusing. "You always read too much into things," he'd say. "You're lucky, Mira. You have a beautiful home, a stable life. Just relax." And for a moment, she would doubt herself. That's how it always began. He would gaslight her with just the right balance of charm and logic, twist her emotions into overreactions, wrap his cruelty in the language of care. Soon, she began forgetting things. Not big things, just little details. Where she'd placed her phone, whether she had really turned off the stove. Sometimes she'd find text messages marked as read before she'd opened them, calls mysteriously deleted from her log. Samir would laugh when she brought it up. "Maybe pregnancy brain is real after all," he'd say with a wink. "You're so forgetful lately." But Mira was sure, absolutely sure, that she hadn't left her phone on the balcony that morning, that she hadn't dropped her diary open on the nightstand, that she hadn't told Samir about her private call with her best friend. And yet somehow, He referenced it later with unsettling casualness. Her world began to tilt. She started second-guessing herself. Was she really becoming paranoid? Was the stress of the pregnancy making her irrational? She tried meditating, journaling, even speaking to her doctor, but everything came back normal. What wasn't normal was how alone she felt in a house where nothing was ever really hers anymore. Her privacy, her time, her peace, even her own mind felt under surveillance. And the most terrifying part, Samir never raised his voice, never touched her in anger. But somehow, she was shrinking, fading, doubting herself more with every passing day. Because control, she was learning, didn't always come in shouts and slaps. Sometimes, it came with a smile, and a soft voice that made you question your own reality. It was nearly midnight when the glitch happened. Mira was in bed, propped up by pillows, reading a parenting article on her tablet while the house hummed quietly around her. Samir was away on another urgent trip, and the silence was thick enough to feel. Just as she reached to dim the lights using the smart home app on her tablet, the screen flickered. Then everything went black. The lights in the bedroom turned off, the blinds shuttered halfway open, and the climate control beeped twice before shutting down completely. For a moment, the entire house fell into a strange stillness, lifeless, like the breath had been pulled out of it. Sighing, Mira slipped out of bed, pulled on her robe, and padded down the hallway to the control hub screen in the living room. Samir usually handled the technical side of things, but she had watched him navigate the panel enough times to at least manage a reset. She tapped the screen gently. Nothing. Then again, this time with a little more pressure. It lit up suddenly, not with the usual calming home dashboard, but with a screen she had never seen before. A row of thumbnails, labels under each. Kitchen _cam, driveway _cam, nursery _cam _1, bedroom _cam _2. Her finger froze in mid-air. The last one caught her breath. Bedroom _cam _2. Her bedroom? She hesitated, then tapped the feed. The screen blinked, and a video stream opened. There she was, asleep in their bed, curled on her side with one arm over her belly. A live feed. The timestamp showed it was from just 2 nights ago. The angle was high and wide, coming from somewhere near the bookshelf. She staggered backward, her hand flying to her chest. Her heart thundered in her ears. There were cameras, not just in common areas but in her bedroom, watching her sleep, recording her without consent. She quickly exited the screen, tapping furiously to get back to the home panel. But the image was burned into her mind. Mira had never agreed to anything like this. Samir had never even mentioned security cameras inside the bedroom, not once, and yet, there they were, installed, active, hidden. She stood in the soft blue glow of the hallway, clutching her belly protectively as the house buzzed back to life, lights stabilizing, blinds adjusting, temperature returning. Everything returned to normal. Except her. The next morning, Mira couldn't shake the image of herself sleeping, watched by a lens she never consented to. Her skin crawled with unease. Every room now felt suspicious. Every object looked like it might be hiding something. She waited until the house was empty. Samir had left for the office early, claiming back-to-back meetings all day. As the front door clicked shut and his car pulled away, she stood in the center of their bedroom, heart pounding, eyes scanning. She walked slowly, deliberately, taking in every detail. There on the far wall above the vanity hung a large, ornate mirror. It had always seemed more decorative than useful, a statement piece. Samir had chosen it himself, saying it added depth to the room. Now, that very depth felt like a deception. Mira approached the mirror cautiously, fingers trembling. As she reached behind it, the edge of the frame had a small panel barely visible to the eye. She pried it open with a nail file, and sure enough, nestled in the carved wood was a tiny black lens, no bigger than a pencil eraser. It blinked once, faintly. Her stomach twisted. She staggered back, clutching her belly. Her breathing became shallow. The walls felt like they were closing in. She braced herself on the edge of the bed as the full weight of realization sank in. She had been watched, constantly, silently, without her knowledge. And not just while sleeping. She thought of all the moments she'd had in this room. The late-night tears, whispered phone calls to her mother, the way she would talk to the baby growing inside her, dreaming aloud about names and futures. How she sometimes sat in silence for hours, doubting her marriage, doubting herself, wrapped in nothing but a robe and vulnerability. And Samir had seen all of it. Or at least, he could have. Was the surveillance, obsession, control, something sicker? She checked the rest of the house methodically, opening drawers, inspecting shelves. She found another camera above the nursery doorway, small, nearly invisible. One in the kitchen, cleverly hidden near the spice rack. Another, disturbingly, in the shower light fixture of the guest bathroom. She felt like a prisoner in her own home. Back in the bedroom, she stared at the blinking eye in the mirror. This wasn't for security. This wasn't to protect. This was violation masked as technology. Trust weaponized. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just from fear, but from the betrayal. The man who claimed to love her, who touched her belly and whispered about their future child, had been watching her like an object as she gently unplugged the mirror's hidden wire. The lens went dark, the room fell silent, but the echo of what she'd discovered would never fully disappear. Samir returned home later than usual that evening, as if the storm brewing inside the house wasn't waiting for him. Mira sat on the edge of their bed, hands folded tightly in her lap, the small camera she'd removed from behind the mirror resting like a loaded weapon beside her. She didn't greet him when he walked in. She didn't ask about his meetings. She just looked at him, cold, steady, and silent. He paused in the doorway, briefcase in one hand, eyebrows lifting ever so slightly. "You okay?" Mira didn't blink. "How long have the cameras been in this house?" His gaze shifted for only a second, quick, but she caught it. Then came the smile, controlled, gentle, dangerous. "I'm guessing you found the one in the mirror," he said. Walking inside like this was a normal conversation. He set the briefcase down, loosened his tie, and sat in the chair across from her. "I was going to tell you eventually." Eventually, her voice cracked. "You had cameras watching me in our bedroom, Samir. While I slept, while I cried, while I undressed, and you were just going to mention it over breakfast." He leaned back, resting one ankle over his knee. "You're upset, I understand. But Mira," his voice softened, "it's not what you think. I did this for your safety." Her hands tightened into fists. "Don't you dare say that. I mean it," he said calmly. "This house is too big. You're pregnant. What if something happened while I wasn't home? What if you slipped in the bathroom, or fainted, or God forbid went into labor early and couldn't reach me? The cameras were meant to give me peace of mind for you," she snapped. "Not for me. I never agreed to live in a house that watches me like a lab rat." Samir sighed as if he were the one exhausted. "You're being emotional again. You always jump to the worst conclusions, because you never give me the truth." Mira stood now, the tension radiating off her. "This isn't love, Samir. This is control. You monitor what I eat, who I call, where I go. You've been erasing my messages, listening to my conversations. Don't pretend this is about protection. You're pregnant," he said sharply, rising to meet her eye. "You need rest. You don't know what kind of pressure you're putting on yourself by obsessing over nothing." She laughed bitterly. "Nothing. Hidden surveillance is nothing to you. It's precaution, Mira, and honestly, I think we should call your doctor. You've been acting erratic, paranoid, hormonal." And there it was, the final card he always played. The dismissal cloaked as concern. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't gaslight me." He looked away. "You're reading too many blogs." She stared at him, this man she once believed was her protector, her partner. And all she saw now was a cage, disguised as a husband. "I'm not crazy," she whispered. "And I'm not yours to monitor." Samir's smile faltered just slightly. "Careful, Mira, you don't want to make poor decisions in your condition." But she was already walking away, because now she finally knew. This wasn't love. It had never been love. This was a man who wrapped control in velvet and called it care. And she was done pretending not to see it. The next morning, Mira waited until Samir had left for work before pulling out her old phone, the one she had kept hidden in the bottom drawer of her jewelry box, wrapped in a silk scarf. Powered off for months, it had no apps, no synced accounts, no digital fingerprints Samir could trace. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the contacts and paused at a name she hadn't dialed in over 2 years. Rehan Bai, her brother. They hadn't spoken since her wedding. Rehan had voiced concerns early on about Samir, called him too polished, too careful, like someone who'd studied how to be charming. Mira had taken offense, chosen her husband over her brother, and walked away from the one person who had always protected her. She stared at the number for a long moment, then hit call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. "Hello." His voice was older, tired, wary. "It's me," she said softly. "Mira." There was a pause, heavy, silent, emotional. "Mira." His voice cracked slightly. "Are you okay?" "No," she whispered. "I'm not." They talked for nearly an hour. Mira told him everything about the cameras, the manipulation, The way she felt watched, erased, and slowly broken. Rehan didn't interrupt. When she finished, he took a deep breath. I always had a bad feeling about him, he said. And now I'm wondering what else he's hiding. Mira nodded, wiping her tears. Can you help me? I'll look into him, he said immediately. Background, business records, anything public or buried. But Mira, you need to be extremely careful now. Don't let him know you've spoken to me. Don't change your routine to suddenly. Men like him, they don't lose control easily. Her heart pounded harder. Do you think he's dangerous? Rehan didn't answer right away. I think, he said quietly, that you're married to a man who built a perfect image, but perfect images often hide cracks underneath. And I think we're just beginning to see them. Mira's voice shook. What should I do? Act normal. Keep gathering anything you can. Don't confront him again. Not until we have something solid. I'll take care of the digging. You take care of yourself and the baby. It was the first time in months Mira felt like someone was truly on her side. And for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. Samir always kept his study locked. It was the one space in the house Mira was never allowed to enter. No matter how long they'd been married or how much she insisted, she simply wanted to understand his work. It's sensitive, he would say with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. NDA stuff. You wouldn't find it interesting. But now, after everything she'd learned with Rehan digging into Samir's past, Mira was done being polite. The opportunity came 3 days later. Samir left in a rush that morning, complaining about a meeting that couldn't be missed. Mira waited exactly 37 minutes, long enough to confirm he was gone for good, then walked down the quiet hallway to the study. She'd taken a bobby pin from her hair and spent the last 2 nights learning how to pick a lock from YouTube tutorials on her hidden phone. Her heart pounded as she bent over the doorknob, fingers trembling. It clicked open faster than she expected. The room smelled of leather and cedar, with dark wood paneling and neatly organized bookshelves. His desk was spotless, as always. The blinds were closed. A sleek black laptop sat charging in the corner. Mira walked straight to it. The login screen appeared. She tried a few obvious passwords: his birthday, her name, their wedding date. Nothing worked. Then she typed in Ari's, the name they had planned for the baby. Access granted. She wasn't sure if that made her feel better or worse. The desktop looked clean, almost empty. Too empty, but tucked into a folder named Project Docs. She found a hidden folder tree that required an extra password. She tried admin, and the folders opened like a dark maze. Assets, compliance, surveillance logs, personal archives. Her stomach turned. The personal archives folder held a list of video files, most labeled with dates and female names. Her hand shook as she opened one. A woman appeared on screen, maybe mid-30s, sitting in a plush room similar to this very house. She was crying. Her face was red, hands folded in her lap, eyes darting toward the camera like she knew she was being watched. Another file. A younger woman, curled up on a couch, whispering to herself. A third. Someone screaming at a man off-screen. You said you loved me. You said this was real. Mira slammed the laptop shut. Nauseated. She backed away from the desk, her knees wobbling. She wasn't the first. There were others. Other women Samir had manipulated, trapped, recorded, possibly blackmailed or worse. She thought of the locked safe in the hallway, of the way Samir always seemed to know more than he should. This wasn't just obsession. This was a pattern, a design. The perfect image he showed the world was a facade. Behind it was a man who collected people like data, who packaged control as affection. And now she was part of his archive. She grabbed a USB from the drawer, copied the folder in a panic, and shoved it into her pocket. Her body screamed to run, but her mind told her, not yet. Be smart. Don't let him know. Not until you're safe. Mira closed the laptop, relocked the study, and walked calmly back to her room. But inside, she was shaking, because now she wasn't just trying to escape a broken marriage. She was trying to escape a man with secrets, and she had just uncovered the darkest one yet. Mira had never been much of an actress, but now, her survival depended on her ability to play the role of a loving, oblivious wife. She smiled at the breakfast table when Samir asked about the baby. She nodded along as he talked about his investors, laughed gently when he teased her for waddling like a duck. She kept her voice soft, her eyes calm, her hands still though inside. Her heart pounded like a war drum. She knew now what she was dealing with. Samir wasn't just manipulative, he was dangerous, calculated, and used to being 10 steps ahead. If she wanted to escape with her life and her child, she had to be smarter. That night, Once he had gone to bed, Mira crept out of their bedroom and returned to the study with the copy of the surveillance files, still hidden in the folds of her robe. She plugged in a new, encrypted USB 1 Rehan had mailed her to a secure location and began transferring everything she could find, the videos, the folders, even internal emails between Samir and unfamiliar names. It took over an hour. She sat in silence as the files copied, her eyes flicking to the door every few seconds. The slightest creak in the hallway made her jump. When it was done, she tucked the USB inside a tampons box at the back of the bathroom cabinet somewhere Samir would never look. Over the next few days, Mira built her plan piece by piece. She prepared a go bag, light but essential, clothes, copies of her medical records, IDs, a small stash of cash, the USB, and prenatal vitamins. She hid it in the storage bench under the nursery window, camouflaged by baby blankets. To create a believable cover, she called a different GYN clinic across town, one Samir didn't know about, and booked an appointment. It gave her a reason to leave the house with her hospital file. She even printed a referral note and placed it on the kitchen counter, as if by accident, subtle enough for Samir to see, obvious enough to feel routine. When he glanced at it, she smiled. "The other clinic has a better ultrasound machine," she said. "I want to see the baby clearly this time." Samir nodded. "Whatever makes you feel safe, Jan, safe." The word rang hollow now. Each night, Mira lay beside him, eyes closed, body still, but sleep never came. Every sound, every breath, every shift of the sheets was a threat. She counted the days until her appointment, each one heavier than the last. But Mira had something Samir didn't expect. Not just fear. Fire. And it was growing stronger with every beat of her child's heart. The house was too quiet. Mira had just returned from what was supposed to be her escape appointment, the GYN visit. That would give her cover to disappear. But something felt off. The lights were dimmer than usual, the air colder. Her instinct screamed. She stepped into the foyer, clutching her file, her heart thudding in her chest. "Welcome home," came a voice from the shadows. She froze. Samir emerged from the living room, perfectly composed in his usual crisp shirt and tailored trousers, sleeves rolled up just enough to look relaxed. A wine glass dangled from his fingers, untouched. He smiled. "I thought I'd surprise you," he said. Mira's throat went dry. She forced a smile. "You're home early. I canceled my meetings," he said, walking toward her slowly. "Turns out, I've been a little distracted lately. There's been movement in the house, shifts in routine, a lot of activity." In the study, her hand tightened around the file. She kept her tone light. "I was just organizing some things, nesting." Maybe his smile widened to calm, to knowing. "You mean like when you were copying files to a USB stick and emailing your brother behind my back?" Her stomach dropped. The blood drained from her face. Samir took a sip of wine, then set the glass down with a soft clink. "You really thought you were smarter than me, Mira?" She backed away a step, trying to remain steady. "How long have you known Bo?" "Since the day you accidentally found the Mira feed. You triggered a backup alert. After that, I watched you every night. Quiet little mouse, crawling through my system." Her heart raced. "But I let you play your little game," he continued, voice calm and cold, "because I wanted to see how far you'd go. The USB, cute, Rehan, predictable, honestly. I expected more." Mira turned slightly toward the hallway, toward the nursery, the storage bench, the door that led to the outside. "I just wanted to leave," she said quietly. "I don't want your money. I don't want revenge. I just want to raise my baby in peace." Samir tilted his head. "You don't get to walk away from me, Mira. You are mine. This house, this child, this life, I built it. You don't take that and run." She took a breath and darted for the hallway, but he moved faster. He blocked the path, stepping in front of her with terrifying ease. "Don't do something you'll regret." Her voice cracked. "If you touch me, I won't," he said, smile gone. "I don't need to. You won't make it far. You're 8 months pregnant and alone. No one's going to help you. Your brother, he's a washed-up journalist with no proof. The police won't believe you. And you'll look like an emotional wreck of a housewife." Her legs were trembling now. She stared at him, this man she once thought was gentle, who had whispered love into her hair, who now stood before her as her captor. "You're wrong," she said softly. "I have everything I need." His eyes narrowed, and she realized in that moment, fear might live in her bones, but defiance lived in her blood. Samir took a step toward Mira, but before he could speak, a sharp knock shattered the moment. Bang, bang, bang. The front door. Samir paused, his jaw tightening. Mira's breath caught. Then, a voice loud and authoritative echoed through the hallway. Mr. Samir Rahim, this is the Cybercrime Division. Open the door immediately. Samir's composure cracked for the first time. He turned sharply toward the foyer just as the door burst open. Uniformed police officers poured into the house, followed by a man in plain clothes. Rehan. He looked furious. Mira. Rehan's eyes found her instantly. She ran to him, her brother wrapping her in a protective hug that steadied her legs for the first time in days. Samir raised his hands, trying to speak. This is a mistake. You can't just barge into. You're under investigation for illegal surveillance, coercion, and digital stalking. The cybercrime officer interrupted, holding up a warrant. We've been monitoring your network for weeks, following a tip-off from another woman. Mira's eyes widened. She wasn't the only one. The team began sweeping the house. Officers moved methodically, pulling hidden cameras from behind vents, light fixtures, and wall panels. Another officer walked out of the study carrying multiple hard drives and USB sticks, carefully sealed in evidence bags. Samir stood frozen, stripped of his usual confidence. Mira watched him. The man who had once seemed larger than life now dwarfed by the truth surrounding him. One officer approached her. Ma'am, we'll need your testimony. But you're safe now, she nodded, holding her belly protectively as if to shield her child from the storm that was finally ending. Rehan leaned in, whispering, he won't hurt you again. It's over. Mira looked around the house, still pristine, still cold, but now crawling with justice. The silence that had once felt suffocating was finally broken. And in its place came the sound of freedom. Samir's arrest made headlines. What began as a single complaint spiraled into a full-blown scandal. In the days following his detainment, more women came forward, former assistants, ex-girlfriends, even two who had tried to speak up years ago but were silenced by NDA letters and threats. Now, their voices rang loud, together, their stories painted a chilling picture of a man who had built his empire not just on code, but on control. The court hearings began swiftly. Mira gave her testimony with her lawyer beside her, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She didn't just speak for herself, she spoke for every woman who had sat in silence, afraid to name what had been done to them. 2 weeks after her final appearance in court, Mira went into labor. She gave birth to a healthy baby girl at a public hospital, far from the cold marble walls of the life she had escaped. Rehan was by her side, his hand gripping hers during every contraction, whispering encouragement through gritted teeth and soft tears. They named her Nurlight, because after all the darkness, she was proof that something beautiful had survived. Mira didn't go back to the mansion. She never wanted to see it again. Instead, with Rehan's help, she moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the city's quieter side. The building was older, the kitchen tiles chipped, the water pressure inconsistent, but it felt alive, real, safe. The first morning there, sunlight spilled through the windows onto the wooden floor. Mira stood barefoot in the small kitchen, holding Nur to her chest as she brewed tea. It wasn't luxury, but it was freedom, and that made it priceless. She started therapy soon after. At first, she felt hesitant, unsure if talking would heal wounds that still pulsed beneath her skin. But with each session, she unpacked the guilt, the fear, the confusion. She stopped blaming herself for staying too long, for not seeing the signs sooner. She learned how trauma hides, how manipulation warps love into something unrecognizable. Slowly, Mira began to reclaim her identity. She signed up for a virtual design course, something she had once dreamed of. Before Samir pulled her into his shadow, she made friends at her local library's new mothers group. She laughed more, slept more, and held Nur with the tenderness of a woman who had earned her peace the hard way. Samir remained behind bars, awaiting trial. Public sympathy for him evaporated, replaced by growing support for the women he had tried to erase. But Mira wasn't focused on him anymore. She had a new life to build, a new voice to trust her own, and in her arms, a daughter who would grow up never having to be afraid of silence. 1 year later, Mira stood behind a podium, the logo of her foundation free to breathe shining on the banner behind her. A soft murmur of voices filled the community center, rows of women seated in quiet anticipation. Some wore bruises still visible, others bore invisible scars. But all of them had come to hear a woman who had once stood exactly where they now sat. Mira adjusted the mic and began. I used to live in a smart home with marble floors and invisible walls, she said, her voice clear and steady. From the outside, my life looked perfect, but inside, I was being watched, controlled, and broken down one small violation at a time. The room was silent, no shifting, no coughing, just listening. And the worst part, she continued, it didn't start with violence. It started with love, with attention, with someone saying, I'm doing this for you, until suddenly, nothing I did was private anymore. Until my thoughts weren't mine, my choices weren't mine, until I was just monitored. Mira paused, meeting the eyes of a woman in the front row who had flinched when she spoke the word monitored. But I got out, she said, softer now, and not just physically. I got out of the shame, the fear, the silence. I stopped asking, why didn't I leave sooner? And started asking, what can I do now? That question had become her mission. After Samir's trial began, and the wave of public support that followed, Mira had launched Free to Breathe, a non-profit dedicated to helping women escape coercive control, especially those trapped in marriages dominated by technology-fueled surveillance. They provided legal referrals, emergency housing, tech literacy workshops, and digital safety guides. But perhaps the most powerful service of all was the listening. Every week, Mira hosted group circles where women told their stories without interruption, without judgment, without shame. And in between all of that, she wrote. Her blog, Unmuted, had grown to thousands of subscribers. She wrote about healing while raising a child, about learning to sleep without fear, about choosing not to forgive someone just because the world expected it. She wrote about the quiet dignity of surviving. She wrote about NOOR. Her daughter was almost walking now, curly hair, wide eyes, a laugh that filled their small apartment like music. Mira raised her with softness and fire, teaching her that safety was not silence and that real love didn't come with cameras. After the talk, she stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, Noor resting on her hip. Rehan was waiting nearby, chatting with a volunteer. Mira waved to him and then looked down at her daughter. You hungry, baby? She whispered, brushing a kiss across her forehead. Noor giggled in response. A photographer from a women's magazine approached her with a gentle smile. Just one last question, Mira, after everything, how would you define love now? Mira smiled. Eyes turning thoughtful, she looked toward the sky, open, wide, free. And then, in voiceover style narration, as if echoing across the lives of the women she'd helped, she said, he said he loved me, but love doesn't watch you like prey. Love doesn't cage you in polished rooms. Love lets you live, and now, I live freely.